We're very excited to have you join us today. We hope you and your families are staying healthy during this incredibly challenging time. We just want to send our appreciation for all the members on the line who are joining us today. This is the first of what we hope will be many Caribbean roundtables in the future. And it's a great way to connect with everybody in the islands. And then of course, we will hope to meet in Miami and other places in the Caribbean again in the future. Special shout out to Adam Greenfader, the chair of this committee, who has been working really diligently during the quarantine to set up some really interesting content conversations, which he calls Caribbean Conversations, to kind of get an idea of what's going on in various islands and different industry professionals. These conversations are very topical, and we are putting them on ULI's Knowledge Finder, which is a portal for all the information that ULI brings in. Again, thank you for joining us today, and we just truly value your participation with ULI and are excited to see, what the future holds for the organization. And then now I want to hand it over to Adam.
Thank you, Julie. And Max, who's not visible, who's also part of ULI. You guys have done a great job, and I think in these challenging times, staying together as a group and as an organization has really been important for me to feel at least that there's some humanity out there. And I've really appreciated speaking to a lot of you. I see there's just so many people and friendly faces that I just can't wait till we all can get together and be together in person. But most of all, I really would like to just thank and take just a quick moment of silence to all the people who have been really fighting for us on the medical side, and to our friends and families who have suffered. If we could just take 10 seconds of silence, please. Great, thank you. And I hope that we all are going to be able to come out of this even better. We've done some quick math, and just to give you an idea in terms of flights, assuming that we use 125 seat planes as an average, it's about 7,300 flights 60 days ago, and that's just about 1,300 flights today. So the bottom line is we are having this conversation in a period of just absolute trials and tribulations for the Caribbean region. And I hope that part of today we can kind of look to what it's going to be like when we can get back to takeoff. We try to bring the best and brightest minds of finance, of real estate development, of government, of construction, and I hope that from all different parts of the Caribbean and Latin America, and you guys will get a feel for what we're trying to do to take off again.
So Rogerio Basso, I'm the head of tourism for IDB Invest. IDB Invest is the private sector division of the Inter-American Development Bank Group. We are one of the largest multilateral development financial institutions focused in Latin America and the Caribbean. We do about $5 billion of investments in the region across a variety of sectors. And relative to the Caribbean, certainly tourism is one of the most important contributors to the economic engine of the region. And it is in these moments of crisis that we see how vulnerable the sector is and the region is. But at the same time, it is organizations like us who are countercyclical, who can step in and provide some much needed support. So glad to be here.
Buddy Darby, I'm a large-scale community developer. Have a project on St. Kitts at the southern end, 2,500 acres. So it encompasses both a resort component as well as residential lifestyle component. Counting, if you discount when I started in 2008, the first 4 or 5 years, we've been going at it for about 8 or 9 years. And I'm there because St. Kitts is relatively undeveloped because of the sugarcane producing the country that they were until about 2005. So it's relatively undeveloped, and for a developer point of view like myself, it's relatively unspoiled. So I have the chance of, being able to make a 2,500 acre development on a relatively unspoiled palette. So where the weather's 81 to 85 year round, and we got a very stable government. So, and a very, I have a marina, so I have, the hotbed of the yachting industry there. So that's why I'm there. I'm based in Charleston, South Carolina, where I've developed Q Island and other resorts around the world.
My name is Alfredo Martinez Alvarez. I'm the chairman of the Puerto Rico Builders Association. Our association gathers developers, general contractors, architects, engineers, lawyers, the banking system, all out of 3 banks. 2 of our major banks in Puerto Rico are members of our and real estate brokers. So we are the voice of economic development here in Puerto Rico. We gather so many people that we're pushing every minute to be the best, make Puerto Rico the best part of the Caribbean. I'm sorry, Hermina, but we're trying to do that. So the 5 things that I like about the Caribbean is the sun, the beach, the golf courses, and it's the best place to invest.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here from Dominica. My name is Hermina Augustine. I'm with Invest Dominica Authority. We're a government agency responsible for investing. Dominica, as you know, is just one of the most beautiful islands in the Caribbean. We pride ourselves on having a lot of water, a lot of nature, tranquility, and we're hoping that we will be the destination of choice after all of this turbulence that we're going through. In any event, I will say that what I love the most about the Caribbean is the versatility of its tourism product, that it actually offers everyone, almost any type of traveler, some type of option. So I think the Caribbean is the best. Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
My name is Christian Roberts. I'm president of Prime. Prime is a company based out of San Jose. We have presence in Guatemala, Colombia, and most recently El Salvador. And we've participated in 161 projects in 17 countries here in LATAM. About 40% of what we've done is hospitality, and the rest is widespread among the different asset classes. What I like about the Caribbean is really, pura vida, just the lifestyle, the way that you can experience life in these destinations. And just to wrap it up in terms of what we do, which I skipped, I got excited with the pura vida, is we do real estate structuring, we do real estate private equity, and we do real estate development, but mainly co-development. We've invested through a couple of development companies in our markets. Thank you again for having me.
Great. Just for people, what does pura vida mean in English?
Pure life.
Sean, please.
My name is Sean O'Neill. I'm the managing director of the agency Turks and Caicos and the agency Caribbean. We're a luxury lifestyle and real estate company based in the Turks and Caicos Islands, operating here in Anguilla, Antigua, and the Bahamas. I was born and raised in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and my main areas of focus are the Turks and Caicos and Anguilla. We like to focus largely on exclusive island luxury and the real estate components that go with that. I think that to go with everything else that my colleagues here have said about what they love about the Caribbean, I think that as things stand where we are in the world right now, one of the main things I love is the fact that remoteness is not new to us. And all of our islands are filled with creative people who have the ability to take circumstances such as this and put it to the benefit of our communities.
And to all of the speakers, as you guys can hear, we have really an impressive group. So I'd like to now turn it over to Rogelio, and who's going to start with a 5-minute presentation. We like to call this facts on the ground, real life information from what we hear. Rogelio, please.
Sure. Just to give a little bit of context, what I mentioned before is that the region is so heavily dependent on tourism. We've all heard the statistics that tourism represents about 10.4% of GDP throughout the world, but in the Caribbean region, that amounts to about 15.5%. And as it relates to employment, It represents 13.5% of employment. So this is really important, and it is in a moment of crisis like this that we see that those 2.4 million jobs in the region can get significantly affected. We also have a situation where a significant portion of demand in this area is leisure. About 89% comes to vacation. Only a fraction is for corporate business. And of that demand that comes, the majority is international. About 73% is international, which is important because it allows all of these countries to be exporting services and therefore having those revenues stay in the country. And when we look at what's been happening in the region, we are coming from a situation where there had been a series of devastating natural events with the hurricanes, the earthquakes that had shaken the region a bit. But in 2019 in particular, we were doing quite well. We actually ended the year with record RevPAR performance. Never in the history of the Caribbean had ADR and RevPAR been that high. So we were in a good position. I think the other element that was important is that because of the crisis in 2008, which was financial in nature, the health of the banking system today is much better. I think there were a lot of protocols that were put in place. The amounts of leverage which were reduced, the underwriting of hotel and tourism players today was much more prudent than had been in the past. So although this situation is extremely devastating, at least from a financial perspective, we are in a better position than before. Having said that, the tourism sector was not built for us to operate at zero revenues. We have significant operating costs, fixed costs, labor intensive, and if we don't sell the night to night, it's not like retail that you can give a discount and sell 2x tomorrow. You're stuck by not having sold that night. So what this means is that there's been a liquidity crunch, a lot of needs for the small and medium-sized enterprises to access liquidity to satisfy the needs on a short-term basis.
Thank you, Rogelio. We'll definitely have some questions for you at the end. I mean, you mentioned a lot of really interesting statistics. Buddy, if you can give us a little insight on what's it like on the ground, please.
Unfortunately, airlift is absolutely stopped. Best we can tell, the American is going to put on one flight from Miami starting in June. Everybody is still being quarantined in home, and pretty strictly, the police are pretty strict about arresting people who are going out. The people are allowed by zones to go out 2 times a week. And, pretty strict measures, but it's done well for both St. Kitts and Nevis. They've only had really identified 12 cases. And so the policy has obviously worked well. I think the Prime Minister took a pretty strict, stance on it, because you have a lot of people with high blood pressure and diabetes. So I think he couldn't risk it. Both the Four Seasons, the Marriott, and our Park Hyatt have been shut down. Our operations are obviously, we went to at first limited operations. The marina, which has a 24 mega yacht slip marina, we had 17 mega yachts there, and roughly we have 11 still there. and we had essential employees approved to basically service them because they couldn't go back to the Med, which they normally do this time of the year. We also had probably 14 or 15 of our member families from all the way from New York to Russia that have basically ridden out this at Christoph Harbor. A lot of them are pleased to have been there. But we haven't really been able to service them in any way because no one has been able to get out of their homes, so we haven't had any of the, food and beverage operations are all shut down. So the island's virtually, shut down. Obviously no cruise ships have been coming or going. So for all practical purposes, other than a few smaller jets that are coming in for cargo, the island has, both Nevis and St. Kitts have been dormant now for almost 7 weeks. Not much easing yet. I think that I think there's a consortium of people led mainly by the Prime Minister in Barbados that's sort of leading that consortium that is probably that's going to determine when that's going to be a little bit more lenient. But right now that's it on the ground, and I think that in terms of us, the Park Hyatt, the Four Seasons, the Marriott, the major hotels that are on St. Kitts and Nevis, I doubt if any of us are going to open up before seasons. If that, hopefully, keep your fingers crossed, we'd be opening up first week in November in time for the 2021 season.
And on behalf of our members, we want to thank ULI for giving us the opportunity to be part of this roundtable. Nowadays, it seems impossible to talk about economic development in Puerto Rico and in most of our neighbor islands in the Caribbean without talking about the momentous task of rebuilding after Hurricane Maria's impact on the island. The Puerto Rico Builders Association has joined effort with top leaders in the industry, such as the ULI, to delineate strategies and provide recommendations aimed at creating resilient communities. Provided to the municipality of Toaja, where a panel of experts provide recommendations to promote ULI's effort in terms of urban design and development practices that are more resilient and adapted to the impact of a climate change. With that in mind, we conducted a housing study which helped identify among other things, that the market not only needed to develop of affordable housing, but luxury homes for those people who have taken the advantage of the benefit that Act 2022 offers for people from the mainland moving to Puerto Rico and becoming residents of Puerto Rico. That act, they could benefit of zero tax on the personal side and on the business side. So the construction industry has been placed on the second phase. So next week, the construction will be open fully and start on May 11th. We need to stress the urgent to design a plan to use of the $20 billion appropriated by the federal government as part of the CDBG-DR program for the reconstruction of the islands after Puerto Rico has no comparison when looking for investment alternatives. The unparalleled combination of a long-standing initiative program, the fact that close to 98% of the island is an opportunity zone designated, and the reconstruction effort in process makes Puerto Rico the best choice. As it widely known, every crisis brings an opportunity. And this time is no exception. United States lawmakers have started to consider the HR 6648 presented by the delegate to the United States Congress for the U.S. Virgin Islands, which will provide an incentive to Puerto Rico and the rest of the U.S. territory to react to the islands, the pharmaceutical industry.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. So the way we're seeing it, we're seeing three different stages. Obviously, pre-COVID, during COVID, and then post-COVID. And when I mean post-COVID, I mean once this is open. We don't know really how long this is going to take. So pre-COVID, we saw a very robust Costa Rica during 2019. We had record occupations, record ADRs, a lot of new development coming online from luxury hotels, all-inclusive hotels, a lot of airlift being added to our offering. So at the end of the day, when we closed 2019, we were in a very, very good position. During COVID, what has happened is the tourism sector, which is 1/3 of the workforce in Costa Rica, was pretty much put on hold. So everybody there is on hold. That represents, like I said, 600,000 direct and indirect employees. And that has obviously a huge impact on our economy. In addition to that, we have a huge fiscal deficit that we've been bringing or carrying on for the last decade. And we had a new law in place passed in 2019 precisely to attack that obviously has been useless given that the government is not collecting taxes during this first semester of the year. So COVID has hit us hard, but we think it's gonna also potentialize a lot of the good things that Costa Rica has. And a lot of the reason why 2019 was a very good year is because Costa Rica is very well aligned with a lot of the wellness trend and that humanization effort that is going on in the tourism sector globally. And I think that's just being reinforced. The health system in Costa Rica has been phenomenal over this COVID crisis. We have the lowest lethality rate in all of the Americas, 0.86. And really, we have 760 cases out of which we've had 6 regrettable deaths, and over 470 people have already been or have already recovered. So we have the curve very well under control. And I think that's going to be very, very good for the tourism sector. In the rest of the real estate asset types, I think it's also going to be very positive, given that all of the services industry, I'd say most of the services industry has remained intact. People have been able to work from home without a problem. All of the free trade zones have been working really well. Our medical devices clusters have been working 100%. And so I think that a lot of the manufacturing moving to the Americas, or especially the high value added manufacturing and the higher tech type of things, are going to be moving and relocating to Costa Rica. And we've already seen, even in the last couple of weeks, a big spike in that direction. So we're very confident that that's going to help us. On the other hand, we're going to close this year with a fiscal deficit of above 8% of our GDP. So that's a huge issue we're carrying, and we need to solve that. But hopefully that's gonna get resolved. And like in every crisis, it was mentioned earlier, there's opportunity. So being from our perspective, a lot of opportunity in terms of structural deals coming online and being able to facilitate equity and debt sources to the different countries where we're participating.
Thank you, Adam. Well, like Puerto Rico, Bahamas, Dominica, as well as most of you will remember, is also recovering from Hurricane Maria 2017. And we're still in recovery phase. But luckily for us, with our announcement by our Prime Minister that we were looking at being the first climate resilient country in the world, we started a lot of work towards being more climate resilient. So while we're preparing for that, we did not anticipate, like the rest of the world, that the next disaster would have been one of that nature. So we are working on dealing with climate issues, and then here comes another one, which is not directly related. But what we can say here in Dominica is that maybe a lot of the things that we are putting in place in being more climate resilient, and already Dominica is the nature island of the Caribbean, we are going to utilize that to see how we can bring in more health, more wellness. We're an ecotourism destination, of course, and see how this two can tie in together as we recover from COVID-19. But generally, as with the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, Dominica did remarkably well with dealing with COVID-19. At the moment, we have 16 cases. We have not had any new cases in the last 3.5 weeks, 0 deaths, 14 people have completely recovered, and we have 2 more in isolation, hoping that their status will change over the next few days. The entire country is still in lockdown, but lifting some of our restrictions. Our borders have been closed since the end of March, since March 25th. Our borders have been closed. We have no air access, except if it's medical or other general cargo. Our seaport is still open to the shipping lines. I saw tropical shipping while I was coming into work this morning. So these are also open. So this allows a certain level, a little buffer somehow in dealing with business. As far as the hotel sector is concerned, and we at Invest Dominica, the tourism sector is one of our key sectors that we promote. So as far as this sector is concerned, all our resorts are closed. And it was really heartbreaking to see, like there was a resort, the Rosalie Echo Resort, which only reopened in February from the hurricane, and they had to be closed in March. We were very proud to announce the opening of Kempinski Caprice Resort last November. And everybody had to be sent home and the hotel had to be closed. So in terms of the employment, we have several hundreds of people who are unemployed in that sector. However, we do have some projects that are on the ground. You may know as well that Dominica is one of the islands which promote the citizenship by investment, CBI, and 3 of our major projects are actually still under construction, and construction is continuing. This is a sector which was not closed down, it was not shut down. And one of the things our government did was some sectors which would not have been traditionally considered essential, they would not have been traditionally being considered essential, they allowed them to stay open, like the construction sector, some of the retail in terms of the large supermarkets to allow people to have food. However, we still have curfews from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Last night it was announced that Saturday will not be a curfew day. So our weekends have been completely shut down and people are allowed to go to the beach. As of last night, it was announced that you're allowed to go maybe to the beach, to the river, to the lakes in groups of no more than 10. So it's a peculiar situation in Dominica, but it's almost similar in most of the islands. Dominica has always been the low impact, low volume tourism destination, and we expect it to keep that way. And we believe this in itself is a benefit to us. Just having our special, unique tourism product that has been attracting its own unique clientele as well. So we expect growth in that. We expect more in our wellness. Government has just announced a new program in agriculture. So even homeowners like myself can actually pick up seedlings for vegetables and fruits and other things that you can plant around your homes to secure for job security. This will subsequently assist the hotels when they reopen. However, it's a long, hard road for the entire Caribbean. And in preparing for this, I just wanted to say that I spoke to the president of the Dominica Hotel and Tourism Association, and she informed me that there was a special task force which was formed just to assist the hotel sector. So we are hoping that this will give us the push that we need. Our government is really pushing very hard for us and for everybody to remain safe, but so that the economy can also rebound in a reasonable amount of time. So there will be opportunities despite the looming threats that we have right now. Thank you.
Our emergency powers ordinance came into force at the end of March. And I think the radio address that accompanied that announcement is one of those moments in life that none of us will forget where we were when we heard it. No one ever expected a 7-page piece of legislation from the 1970s would actually ever have to be called into force. And so we've obviously seen a significant adjustment to our way of life as a result of that. There were 24-hour curfews put in place with limitations to go to the supermarket, go to the gas station, things like that that were necessary for daily life. But similar to Dominica, our beaches were closed and there were significant restrictions on what we could do. We have, over the last 2 weeks, seen an easing of that. This week, the beaches reopened. Some industries, such as hardware stores, were allowed to reopen. And as of next Monday, the construction industry will restart. And actually, just before this call started, I got a message that our land registry will reopen in its full capacity as of May 11th. So that's all hopeful for us. We've had very few cases, and tragically, we did have one death associated with COVID-19. But our government, our governor and elected government have done a great job in communicating with us and working with the private sector in terms of how we're going to cope with this. From our private sector real estate element, the Turks and Caicos is a very strong luxury market. We are a low density, high value area to be in the Caribbean. As an example, in Q1 of this year, our average single family home sale was $2.1 million. And that is the market that we have historically targeted from the late 80s up until now, because we can't compete with the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, because we don't have the economies of scale those islands have. And so we have been very lucky to have a cluster in the private sector that has driven this all forward. What we've seen is that even prior to our borders closing, and really predominantly after President Trump's announcement that they were going to start limiting the flights coming in from Europe, we had property owners here for whom it may be their second or third home were electing to come to the Turks and Caicos because they realized that wherever they were living in the world, they were likely to be put under some form of quarantine. And if they were going to have to do that, they'd prefer to be in a larger home with good weather and more space, because the quality of life that you have, even if you're stuck at home in that, is better than most people in urban areas, particularly where we have target markets such as New York, where unfortunately the pandemic was worse than most others. I think that in the actual market, we were very helped because the Turks and Caicos Island government has, for the last number of years, run a budget surplus. And as a result of that, almost immediately after the announcement of the Emergency Powers Ordinance, they came out with an announcement that our stamp duty, which is the one-time property tax that you have to pay in the Turks and Caicos, would be cut by 50% on purchases up until June 30th. This obviously is helping to keep those deals that were on the table prior to our lockdown moving to completion. And we've also seen it as a great economic driver for additional purchases to move to closing once our land registry starts to reopen and we can start doing on-the-spot inspections. I think that, as is key in a lot of these Caribbean countries, particularly the smaller ones like ourselves in Anguilla, the private sector really helps drive the way in terms of where the country needs to go. And the governments are generally very responsive to that, because many of the government members are themselves, prior to being elected, very strongly involved in these private industries. And so we've seen a great creativity and a willingness to listen to the submissions of the private sector. And I know that we're such a tourism-based destination, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, the dollars that come to your business eventually stem from tourism one way or another. And so, like all of the other jurisdictions, we are waiting to see what happens with airlift. Hopefully we can come to a point where we have no cases on island and our lockdown has been successful. But obviously we're dependent on those other jurisdictions to make sure that the people who are coming in here are safe, or at least can be adequately tested both prior to departure and arrival. And from our perspective, we're targeting people who are able to be in that jet set class, who can look at islands like the Turks and Caicos or Anguilla and say, okay, now that I'm going to have an ability to travel again, I want to do what those other people did. And I want to work, I now know I can work remotely, probably to a greater extent than I ever realized before. And as a result of that, I want to be in the Caribbean. I want to be somewhere where if I go through my quarantine or whatever it is, I can still be, out enjoying my life to a better extent than I could when I was back in my urban center. So I think the Caribbean has a great opportunity to harness some of the advantages. I think, Christian said there's opportunity in all of this. And I would agree with what Rogerio said earlier on as well. I don't think we're as leveraged as we were in 2008. And I think that's going to have a significant impact on the market post-COVID, post the release of lockdown. I think there's going to be, in that mid-tier between $500,000 and $1 million, there's going to be opportunities because, unfortunately, some people who work in different sectors are going to have to return to their home jurisdiction. And so that's really where we're seeing more of a push, because in the absence of work, people don't really have much of a choice. But, we feel that real estate is now going to be a very strong economic driver for the Turks and Caicos Islands, because that's where where a significant amount of funding is going to come from in the absence of the hotel and tourism tax, which is really our primary economic driver.
Thank you so much, Sean, and everybody. I think that we're starting to see some threads of optimism in this conversation. I mean, we've heard task forces being created, consortiums being established across Caribbean, which is always nice to see more than one island having that. We're looking at whether it's stamp duties cut by 50% in Turks and Caicos, or Puerto Rico enacting legislation to drive new industry, especially industrial pharmaceutical industry, and we're seeing some beginning of tourism. And I guess my question to the group is, in your opinion, what are going to be the drivers that's going to get our region, the Caribbean, that we love so much, back on track? I mean, what's going to have to happen for this to work, right? Rogerio, I saw you raise your hand.
Just to be a bit contrarian, I think some of the comments that were mentioned here is that there are a lot of initiatives, a lot of reactionary measures that are being taken, but I think we're still very far away from being able to see light at the end of the tunnel. I think the Caribbean in particular is a geography that depends on international airlift, international visitation, and there is a crisis of confidence. Until people are able to feel comfortable that they are secure in the entire value chain, from the moment that they leave their house to get into an Uber to go to the airport, all the way that they get to their hotel, that is going to take some time. So I think what we're hearing over and over is that domestic drive-to tourism is the one that is going to return first. And the issue that we have in the region is that the depth of that market is really shallow. So what we are seeing at the time is that, at least from a financing perspective, there's been a cry, for help as it relates to liquidity. Some of these hotels that were mentioned before, about the 87% of properties that remain closed in the Caribbean, and they're burning anywhere from about $500 to $1,000 per room per month, which is substantial, understanding that whereas in the U.S., the average owner owns about 8 properties in the U.S. In the Caribbean, that is 1.2. So what that means is that these are single entity owners, and they don't have maybe the wherewithal of a more institutional player to withstand the situation. So as some of these companies have been approaching us, the idea is first how to work with the existing loans, by providing some sort of flexibility, usually allowing them to tap into existing reserves, whether that be a debt service reserve account or a liquidity account first, and then thinking about maybe forbearance on the interest, and also the reduction of certain fees. There is no solution across the board, a standardized solution across the board. We need to look at each of these on a case-by-case basis, because ultimately, you know, as a financial institution, you need to protect your health, and you cannot have a blanket solution. We are seeing that a key criteria for us to make any sort of adjustment is that you needed to be in good standing to begin with, and the business needed to be solid. If you're already struggling pre-COVID, it is very difficult that we can put good money after bad money. But most importantly, what we're seeing is that this crisis cannot be resolved by the private sector alone. It does require government support in the form of stimulus. We already saw in the United States, the $2 trillion plus. The countries in the Caribbean are much more, limited. I was very happy to hear Sean's comment that the balance of accounting PCI was positive and healthy. So that gives you a little bit of cushion. But like Christian mentioned before, Costa Rica at 8%, there is going to be a fiscal policy problem going forward, as these governments, they need to indebt themselves to help specific sectors. So I think one key word that we have been using more and more is, rather than talk about a recovery of the sector, it is really a reconstruction, because there are a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises, a lot of players within the value chain that unfortunately are not going to make it. So how do you think through a post-COVID situation where some businesses have ceased to exist and you need to transfer skills into other areas of the business?
In that sense, there's a recent study by McKinsey & Company on the region. And it was interesting to see that over 80% of the people stopped spending and stopped investing at all. That's one right now. And the other thing is that 66% of the people interviewed said that, or believed that this crisis is going to take anywhere between 6 to 12 months. And an additional, I think it was like 9 or 10% believes this is going to be a much longer than 1 or 2 year type of crisis. So that gives you about a 75%. So again, we're at around, give or take, 80% of the population is basically saying, we're not investing, we're not buying, we're trying not to spend, we're cutting back. And then we believe that this is going to be a mid to long, midterm crisis at least. So given that scenario, even if the economies do bounce back, even if the stimulus plans do fall in place, the reality is that people won't be buying or spending until probably a little bit further out. So that makes it challenging to balance the timing of all of this and understand, okay, I can come and I can build, outside of just the hospitality sector. I can build residences, I can build malls, I can build, anything, or reconvert or reconstruct in some way, going back to what Rogerio just said. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to when people are going to actually exercise, the acquisition or the investment in, or just the general consumption. And I think that's something that's very important. On our end, we've been focusing on a couple of opportunistic vehicles precisely to come in, and I don't say opportunistically in a bad way. We believe in coming in and helping people get out of this and playing a role as a private investor in actually facilitating that. And it's taking minority positions in some of these companies, like Rogerio was saying, that we're well positioned, but their structure or their ecosystem is in a country or in a place where they just can't make it out. And or coming into existing properties and investing in those properties, additional types of uses to try and make the economics work. And in hospitality is a great example. When you look at hospitality, it depends on what Rogerio was saying, or somebody else was saying it previously, that if you don't sell the night, you lose the night. And that's true. It's a very difficult cash flow situation. It's normally a long-term situation. And hotel investors typically make their money back either by selling real estate around that hospitality asset, or selling it, further down the road whenever it's stabilized, which means anywhere between 3 to 4 plus another steady cash flow of 3 years to at least be able to then sell at some reasonable price. So if you're looking at that, the other alternatives is, how can I add real estate to those properties to change the cycle so that I can start selling in a much shorter lifespan, start getting cash through the door, renegotiating my debts, changing the model. And I think in that is one of the aspects also that Rogerio made reference to. We need to be creative. And I think, that's part of what the Caribbean sector area has, that by being creative, we're going to find a way of mixing and blending these asset types and these ecosystems to make it through this initial downturn. And we believe the worst part of the crisis is going to be the second semester of this year. And then once we're out of that, how do we reconstruct ourselves, like Rogerio is saying, and build out into a new normal over the next probably 12 to 18 months?
But buddy, you're the one person here who's actually got a huge resort. It's in the Caribbean. You've got a hotel on it. You've got, 2,000 plus acres of land and a lot of real estate. Kind of what are your thoughts on getting creative in this whole process? I mean, is there something that you're looking at maybe as a way to be able to reconstruct, I guess, which is the word that everybody's talking about?
Having been through a couple of these sort of punctuated times in the last, couple of decades, I mean, I compare where we are closer to 9/11 than 2008. And if you think back to where the way people reacted at 9/11, most people were domestic, traveled, and they stayed home. They didn't go abroad. They didn't take their trip to to faraway places. They were afraid of flying, and I think that's going to be. I think people are going to be very fearful of Europe for a while. I think they're going to be very fearful of flying for a while. I think that I think there's going to be a tremendous opportunity for the Caribbean, in many respects. I think if you look at the soft side of things, I think people in the last 8 weeks have gotten off of the treadmill, especially in the urban areas. And these are the people who have been on flights 3-4 times a week. I think they've reassessed their life, and they've had a flat in some urban area, and they're going like, why? I can take that flat, I can sell it, and I can go and I can be in a place where I've got beautiful sunshine. It's 81 to 85 year round, and I can breathe, and I can have a house where my children want to come and visit, and I can reconnect with my family, and I can go plant a garden if I want, and I can have, beautiful scenery, and I can reverse the whole process. If I need to go back and travel, I can do that, 1 week. I think this whole Zoom phenomena, I think before that, before COVID, I think Zoom was not totally accepted. I think one thing that's going to come out of this whole COVID-19 is Zoom's going to be more widely accepted, I think, as an alternative for people to meet. And, we always said, well, technology allows you to go just about anywhere and keep in touch. But I think that most people, it was not acceptable as a replacement for, meeting face to face. I think that's going to change a little bit. So I think you can go to other places. So, you put all of that into the mix. The big question is going to be airlift, because obviously, the Caribbean has always been the sixth appendage in terms of airlift. You're going to get, people are going to, but, if somehow or another people can demand, I mean, airlines are driven by demand. If you can get people to want to go to the Caribbean and they're not going to go to Europe, and somehow we can put on those, or the airlines can put on those flights, and those flights can, the tourism bodies can buy down some of those flights and get people on those flights, then I think people will tend to go closer in and will not go to these places where they're heavily populated. I don't see, it's an opportunity that is, that maybe, only comes around every once in a while. And I think that whether it's, second home, which I'm doing a lot of, a lifestyle, I think that they're going to be a lot of people that are going to be reassessing where they were pre-COVID, and they're going to be saying, this is what I can do. I mean, someone has a flat, $4 million flat in New York where they have 3,500, 4,000 square feet. They can come down to my place and they can get, a very nice home home that's overlooking, blue water with beautiful weather year round. And I think that, as long as they now can, it's acceptable to do a Zoom meeting and they can reverse their travel patterns. But I don't see people, I don't see people on that treadmill like they used to be. I think that whatever we can do is ULI. I mean, the one thing that has been done in this country is a stimulus package, and it's got its warts, and but these islands have no stimulus package, and so they're flying without anything, and there's got to be something for these islands to bounce back, and some of the hotels are owned by expats, but a lot of them are owned by people on island. And yes, they may have been performing, well before February, but it takes someone with pretty good, resources to carry this thing for the next 12 months, because the income statement's not going to look good for the next 12 months.
I never thought of it as Buddy said, that it's really a similar situation to the post 9/11 in terms of what is going to be happening with people and movements and travelers. This is going to be very, very important in terms of how we handle it. And for the Eastern Caribbean in particular, our connectivity, it's Europe, it's North America. And if these areas are in turmoil, even though we focus on our domestic market in the Caribbean, we are still going to have some challenges around. So the way I see it is we in the Caribbean need to be more creative, reconstructing, making a lot of changes. We must make many, many changes, not just in the hospitality sector. It's important that we make changes in manufacturing. We need to look at renewable energy. It's been a priority for our government. I believe all the other islands need to take upon that. We have not even experienced or benefited from the drop in the price of oil. I think the price per gallon is still the same in Dominica, because sometimes it takes a little while to trickle down to the retailers in the Caribbean. And so sometimes we don't benefit immediately when other people are speaking of something, but we need to look at all the other sectors and diversify. We need to diversify what we're doing in agriculture, in agro-processing, and in adding value, so we can probably support our economies within the Caribbean, so that with the effects that we are having from North America, from Europe, from Asia, it will kind of put a bit of a cushion there on it. But it's still turbulent times, and as we know, the stimulus packages that are being offered, something will also be offered to us in Dominica for the hotel sector. It's just very temporary. This is just to carry some unemployed people or those who've lost revenue for the next maybe 2-3 months. So by November, when the new season opens, if we do not have a proper plan, I believe all hoteliers should be getting together right now. Hotel associations should be getting together with the all stakeholders and ensuring that we have a massive plan for the Caribbean. And with what we're going to have, we're going to see some level of migration as well. We are going to see migration. People will lose jobs in Europe. People may want to look at having homes. Maybe North Americans may look at having homes in the Caribbean. We have to make it better for them. We have to make ourselves be seen as the solution to this crisis. The Caribbean has to be seen as the solution. So I believe it's just a lot of work that we have to do. And again, I'm happy to be here to share this and to learn from the other presenters. Thanks.
So just in conclusion, I would like to say, this is to be continued. We cannot in one session do this. And if you guys are interested, we're here for you at ULI. We're dedicated to tapping the brightest and best minds to find great solutions to obviously very challenging problems. So we will continue. And I just want to say thank you for everybody that made this possible and for dedicating time to this.